The offseason is finally here, and the Mariners are making some moves, as well as the possibility of trading a Eugenio Suarez. And the new managers around baseball are starting to be figured out. This is episode 33 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav network. I'm here with my co-host Joe. Joe, how's it going?
Good, man. I'm doing great. We're in a brand new space here. I know you can't see it right now, but you'll see it when it happens. And I think we look pretty snazzy. If you guys are listening on the audio end, obviously you guys can check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. Just shout out to Bleav for bringing us on and believing in us as the Mariners aficionado for the podcast network. For what? You're mad at me.
Yeah, no, that was good.
Thank you so much.
Another thing that has been good. This is way to go. Another thing that's been good for the Mariners is they made one of their first trades of the offseason, and that was for Blake Hunt. They traded Tatum Levens over to the Tampa Bay Rays. Joe, what does Blake Hunt bring to the table for the Mariners?
More major league catcher ready depth, basically. You know, we traded Tatum Levens. Highest he ever saw last year was Modesto. And it wasn't going to be, he wasn't going to be useful in our system for quite some time, essentially. So Blake Hunt, it's a guy that can be the Brian O'Keefe if you need him to. And, you know, he could be competing for the backup spot coming out of spring training if we don't go out and get a more bona fide option. Like, say, we bring back Tom Murphy and we re-sign him. Blake Hunt will be there to be probably competing with Brian O'Keefe in that capacity. Mainly just waiting for, I think, Harry Ford to be, you know, knocking on the door. And you made a face about Brian O'Keefe. Well, you know, I understand. Whoever's there is catching depth. Blake Hunt will be in competition with them as Cal Raleigh's backup, essentially. It is, you know, I won't say a nothing trade, because whether or not Hunt sees major league innings next year, we don't know yet. We really don't know. But my bet is if we don't go out and sign someone in free agency, that he will likely be the backup catcher. Did okay in AAA last year. He was mainly in AA, AAA last year. But in 30 games, Colton, let me know what the stats are.
Yeah, Blake Hunt is 24 years old in 30 games last year with Durham. He hit 263, 318, 518. He did put up 6 home runs in both AA and AAA in a total of 67 games. I mean, the power wasn't really there for him. Overall, he has been a pretty good hitter throughout his minor league career, hitting 245, 325, 395 with 36 home runs in about 400 games. So Blake Hunt is a guy who I think, again, has a much bigger chance to make the major league roster. And it does give us a lot of, I guess, depth for a position where the Mariners actually just lost a lot of guys in free agency, including Brian O'Keefe and Pedro Severino. Joe, tell me a little bit more about the guys that the Mariners lost from the minor leagues this week, I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was either today or yesterday. And yeah, you mentioned the main two there, Brian O'Keefe, Pedro Severino. These are minor league free agents, so it's not like the major league ones like Tom Murphy. That's another guy that we lost from the catching position. But
Luis Torrens is also gone.
Luis Torrens, yeah, good point. There's some other bigger-ish names. It's not like the end of the world for some of these guys, but they're guys that you might want to bring back, like Jake Schneider could be good in terms of depth at the corner infield spots at close to a major league ready like personnel. We lost Easton McGee, Casey Sadler. I think you mentioned Zach Muckenhern, you know, the guy that we acquired in the Flexen trade. Is that what that was?
Flexen
right?
got.
And so it's just some names here and there that you'll likely see back. Like Juan Ten was another guy that we saw major league innings last year. I think it was like 11 total innings, but still, it's an arm in your pen that you can use. He is currently a minor league free agent. And Colton, there is someone that is also in this group that he's already received a contract, another minor league contract, but a contract nonetheless. Who's that guy?
Yeah, I mean, there were some other guys I wanted to mention too, but it's fine, Joe. Yeah, we'll just move on. Yeah, we're talking about Adam Aller, who just signed a contract with the Guardians like 2 days after he became a free agent. A few other guys that came free agents because I want to talk about it was Robbie Tenowitz, Joaquin Cabrera, Adam Engel, Ty Kelly, guys like that are now gone from the organization. But Adam Aller going over to the Guardians on a minor league deal. And the Mariners also lost someone else to the Guardians. Joe, who was that?
Stephen Vogt. He was our bullpen coach last season. It was the first year he was in the Mariners organization, and we were very excited with him joining the coaching staff. I felt that he himself, I don't know, his profile as a player transitions very well to the managerial aspect, and that is evident because Cleveland Guardians hired him as their manager to replace Terry Francona, a very legendary manager in and of itself. He's got big shoes to fill, but Stephen Vogt, he's definitely a guy that will be able to, I think, fulfill those duties. It's a going to be a tough road in the AL Central, trying to figure out kind of where each team is at, right? The Twins just won the division, but they probably losing Sonny Gray in free agency, potentially. They're looking to trim the fat on some of their payroll, which we'll talk about later. There's a lot of moving parts in the Central. We don't know whether or not the Guardians, as one of the youngest teams in the league, will continue to develop, where the White Sox are at, if the Tigers are going to be more contending. So it's tough to see, but all the best to Stephen Vogt in Cleveland. The one that really shook me up, I think rocked everyone to their core, another Central manager, just switching sides of a rivalry, Craig Counsell going from the Brewers to the Cubs in a record-breaking managerial deal. Colton, you got the figures for that pulled up?
If I remember correctly, he signed like an $8 million a year deal. I don't know how long it was for.
I think it was for 5. So 8
5
years, 40. Or 5, 8 years. 5 years, 40 million, which is a big chunk of change.
That might be more than the Mariners are going to put up in all of free agency this offseason.
Yeah, so, no, that's one thing I wanted to make like some sort of commentary about. So everyone cries all the time, oh, we need a new manager. Say we signed Craig Counsell to be the new manager at 5 years, $40 million. How would we feel about spending on free agents?
Because see us spend.
Yeah, like that's the big contract we go and spend, and who knows how it would work out regardless. It's just a big what if. But that would have been a really funny, I think, dialogue to have happen is we won't spend on the team, but we'll spend on the manager.
Yeah, and we heard that when it was all going down, before it was revealed he was going to the Cubs, they just said that Counsell was going somewhere where there is not a vacancy for manager. And obviously David Ross was the manager for the Cubs. It's kind of, I don't know. Rossi has been beloved for Chicago for a long time. I remember when he was their catcher when they won the World Series. And I don't know, people really like David Ross, and he hasn't been doing it that long, I don't think, 3-4 years.
Yeah, and he wasn't terrible, but
yeah,
obviously Craig Counsell is one of the most. I mean, news to me. Honest, I'm gonna be honest for a second. I didn't know that Craig Counsell was this like highly touted manager across all of MLB. Like everyone and their mother wanted them to be the manager. News to me as of like a week ago. I knew he was doing fine, but I didn't think he was on that like S tier level of managers quite yet.
What I found weird is that they had Craig Counsell and David Stearns, one of the highest rated like GMs in all of baseball, and now they're both gone from the Brewers. Both of them.
So Brewers are in an interesting spot.
I do want to touch a little bit more on Stephen Vogt here before we move on. He was supposed to be, according to Jerry Dipoto, he was going to be given the bench coach role for the Seattle Mariners. Of course, now that's not going to happen. So the bench coach role is going to go to Tony Arnrich, one of the Mariners' old hitting coaches. And then the Mariners are going to look to add another hitting coach in place of Tony Arnrich. Bullpen coach, not sure who it's going to be. I mean, obviously, there's still a lot up in the air. The plan, I think, was for most of the coaching staff to come back next year. Now they're going to start kind of moving around in their roles. So as for what that's going to mean, maybe I would have thought like maybe Manny Acta kind of became more of just a bench coach and not a third base coach. But
yeah, I don't know. It's
I'm
tough
not
to
sure.
say. Tough to see. People, I mean, on Twitter, I've seen the calls for Edgar to return as a hitting coach, which is always a fan favorite option. I understand why. I get it. It's one of those situations that you just kind of want to bring a guy back that's beloved, but
Yeah, because it went so well the first time. The Mariners hit so well. Another managerial change in the American League West was the Angels found their new manager in Ron Washington, former manager of the Texas Rangers. Joe, where was Washington at before this?
I think he was with the Braves, right? Was he third base coach or was he on the bench at that point?
No, he was a base coach. I just don't remember if it was first or third.
Yeah. So Washington, we very familiar with him. If you have been a Mariners fan for quite some time, he was with the Rangers like mid 2000 and
he was
most of the 2010s.
Yeah, he was their manager. I think when they lost the World Series in 2011. So
it'll be interesting to see him come back to the AL West. See if he can kind of right the ship in Anaheim. There's going to be a lot of changes going on there, so. It's not necessarily a ship that's got all of its pieces, but I'm sure if they wanted a veteran kind of manager like type guy to come in. I know Buck Showalter was also in the final running there, so that would have been interesting.
Yeah, I mean they already had Joe Madden, then Buck Showalter. They're gonna go get like, oh gosh, I don't even know. Then they'll call up Tony La Russa.
Yeah, I was gonna say like
you want to manage again?
The delirious white guys.
Anyway, moving on to now the more exciting part of the podcast here. We're going to be talking about a trade that could send Eugenio Suarez to the Toronto Blue Jays, or at least they've been talking about it. Yeah. And then we're going to talk about possibilities of the Mariners trading with the Twins. Obviously, the Twins want to cut payroll, according to MLB trade rumors. And so What does that mean for the Mariners? But first, let's talk about Geno. Joe, what's going on?
I really don't know because the fit for Geno in Toronto doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, especially as like trade partners. I know that Matt Chapman obviously is in free agency. It doesn't seem like there's interest in bringing him back, or maybe he doesn't have interest in going back, maybe at the certain price point. But for Geno, I don't know what the Blue Jays would want to give us in return. I've seen some rumblings of like a George Springer 1-to-1 swap. I don't love that necessarily. I understand where it's coming from because we have a need in corner outfield, and maybe we feel like we could replace third base a bit easier than a corner outfield spot, but that also doesn't feel realistic to me because looking at like even just the free agent class or even bats that are available on the market, I would assume it's easier to replace a corner outfield spot. And so for that, I don't really see how it makes sense. So if I'm being honest, I don't think this is going anywhere. I think it was just rumblings, little little note being thrown across the room. They open it, they check the box, no, and then you send it back, kind of a thing. Like, I don't think Geno's going anywhere. It would be absolute chaos if he were to be shipped out.
I don't understand what that's about. It just makes no sense. Trading Geno for Springer, you cover a position with Springer, who, I mean, sure, would be fine out there. You cover a position that is much easier to fill with the current free agents available, and send away a guy where that position is much harder to fill, a guy who is loved in that clubhouse, for a guy that, let's be honest, Mariners fans aren't going to forget about George Springer and the Astros. They're not going to forget.
Yeah.
So it would make no sense. I don't think there is a single person in the world that would like that specific move. But then looking at it, like, if they did that, maybe the Mariners go out and sign Matt Chapman. No. Heimer Candelario. No, not to be an everyday player at third base. So I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. Of course, there is a possibility of a trade somewhere in there, but losing Geno, again, the Mariners want to cut down on their strikeouts. I get it. I don't necessarily know if trading Eugenio Suarez is the way to do that. Should have been the Gold Glove winner at third base. Wasn't even nominated. And
snubbed.
So could they trade Geno for, gosh, I don't even know. What else would make sense from them?
A package that I saw.
Biggio?
Yeah, like something that I saw on Twitter as well was like bringing Eric Swanson back in some sort of capacity with a trade, and that trade was a big mess.
It was garbage, just say it.
It wasn't great. And so I don't hate bringing Eric Swanson back, but I don't see why the Blue Jays would try and do that either, because they had a very successful bullpen last year. Obviously, they traded for Jordan Hicks at the deadline. I don't know if they're going to be able to retain him, but if they were to, you've got Romano, Swanson, and Hicks at the back of your pen. That's a great solid three. Why would you try and break that up? And even if you don't think you can retain Hicks, you shouldn't trade Eric Swanson at that point either, because you'll need him to be your number two guy behind Jordan Romano. So that also doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's just, I don't see the fit, like, whatsoever. And if the Mariners are trying to compete, and I sure as hell hope they are, because they're one game away, and if they're not, then it's going to be a long off season and a long regular season in 2024. It just there's no fit for me with Toronto, especially trading Geno, because unless there's like the 3-team trade involved somewhere where you backfill that position, maybe you go out and get a second baseman, you move Josh Rojas to third, something like that. Rojas has been a third baseman in the past. I think that was his main position in Arizona. Mm-hmm. So it's a possibility in that capacity, but you still would then need to like supplement Josh Rojas at third base. You can't have him be your everyday third baseman when we didn't want him to be your everyday second baseman, or at least you don't want to. I know some people are probably fine with Rojas. I'm kind of like neither here nor there. Like, I'm not going to lose sleep if he sees the bulk of the innings there, and like our backup is like
Jose Caballero.
Maybe not. It's not like this tremendous upgrade, right? I'm not going to lose sleep over that position like I did in 2023 when we were watching Colton Wong go up there and bat 150. Okay, not even hitting his weight, and he's 5'7".
You don't know how much Colton Wong weighs.
He's a pebble. He's not that heavy.
Yeah, I don't know. It makes no sense. It's a big nothing burger in my opinion. Mariners aren't going to trade Geno to the Blue Jays, and it doesn't make sense. It makes zero sense, in my opinion. Geno is an asset for you this offseason. Even if he wasn't great in 2023, he's an asset to have a guy that can play, obviously, every day. We don't want him to, but can play every day over there at third base. It's not easy to come by this offseason. And in the video that you had made the other day, talking about Jerry DiPoto's comments, he said that they feel like they're pretty set, or they're not set. They're set in the infield.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what he said, or something like that.
Yeah,
Which,
along those lines, set like up the middle, like in terms of
yeah,
certain specific areas. They feel confident with their guys going forward. And so if there's rumblings of like talking about certain players being swat, like again, it's the very beginning of the offseason, it's the GM meetings. It's really not nothing set in stone. There was in that same conversation, John Palmarosi asked Jerry Dipoto about Logan Gilbert. If people have been asking about Gilbert, I'd assume that it's that same situation with Geno for teams that need a third base filled. And if the Mariners are looking to reduce on strikeouts, they like point at him and say, well, he struck out a ton. Are you sure you guys want to bring him back? And then the conversation probably stops there because the Mariners are like, no, we can't lose a big vibes guy. Because losing Teo, I know he was only there for 1 year, but another big vibes guy. I think very high highs, pretty low lows, and I understand that. But as far as bringing vibes into the clubhouse and being an overall like good aura and a great spirit, Teo is a guy like that, and Geno if is double Teo in my opinion, especially for
oh
the
yeah,
Mariners, right? So it rain hellfire if the Mariners got rid of Geno. You know what I mean?
yeah, that's certainly one way to put it for sure. Um, so because of that, because of what we heard about the Mariners saying they're kind of set in certain positions, what have you, the interesting question arises because we heard that the Twins are thinking about lowering payroll. And the Twins in 2023 had the highest payroll in their history at $156 million. They're set in 2023 at the moment to be around, I think, what was like 119 on their 26-man roster.
Okay.
It's not that much, like
No.
thinking about it, and they can win. They can win the division. They did it in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
They lost Sonny Gray, right? Who else did
Maybe.
they lose? Maybe, yeah.
Maybe.
Um, so I don't know, but there are a couple guys on that team that make a lot of sense to trade for. Joe, who are those guys?
For me, there's three standouts. Two more so than the third, but Jorge Polanco, Max Kepler, and then you brought it to my attention before we started recording, Christian Vasquez. If we wanted to, right? If we can't get Tom Murphy back, even though there's interest on both sides to bring him back, say he gets starter money elsewhere, which is possible. It's very possible because in the small limited sample size that we saw from Tom Murphy in 2023, he looked like he'd be a starter for some MLB teams out there. So if we're not able to bring him back and we wanted to maybe not have Blake Hunt be our backup to Cal Raleigh right away, Christian Vasquez might not be a bad guy to go and acquire. It would help them, shave off some of the payroll there. Do you want to tell me more about Vasquez?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Christian Vasquez is making $10 million next year.
Okay.
So I mean, that's quite a bit of money for a backup catcher. So
True.
I don't necessarily know if that's something the Mariners would want to do.
Yeah.
The idea is there. I mean, maybe if they eat some of that money, but Polanco and Kepler are going to be free agents after this upcoming season.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like those are the two most likely to get traded. Polanco's making 10 and a half. Kepler's making 10. So these are guys where, of course, you could slot like Kepler into left or right field. Really good defender out there. But, is he the answer? I'm not sure. He is cheap, though. I mean, $10 million for Kepler is a decent deal, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Polanco, obviously, plays second base, kind of.
Shortstop, second baseman, yeah. Can
Yeah,
play over
kind
the
of.
infield. I feel like if you wanted to, you could maybe try and put him over at third to give Geno a day off if you really wanted to. He's logged a total of 180 major league innings there, so not that much. But if you needed him to, he might be able to. I would say, if anything, Polanco is the right-handed complement to Josh Rojas at second base. I think
Hmm.
that is where he could fill in. It's a more veteran presence, a more proven everyday player compared to, say, like the Haggertys or the Moores or the Caballeros that the Mariners have been fielding as our backups in those positions. It raises the floor, I would say, but the issue then is you have to trade them something to acquire Jorge Polanco or even Max Kepler. If you wanted Kepler to be the rotating fourth outfielder, maybe you go out and sign someone in free agency to play the other corner and then have Kepler rotate with them as DH or whatever you kind of see fit. But in trades, obviously we have to give away some of our assets as well. If you're the Twins, what are you looking for Polanco or Kepler?
I mean, again, losing Sonny Gray, possibly they might be looking to bring back some sort of pitching help.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, yes, the Mariners have that, but are you willing to trade any of that for what the Twins are offering? No, absolutely not. So,
Hmm.
like, you think so? Are you willing to
Well,
give
well,
up
well,
like?
well, well. I'm not like we're not. This is not the Woo Miller conversation. Okay, this is
Mm,
not. This is definitely not the Woo Miller conversation. This might be the Hancock conversation. I
nope,
think no.
not willing to do it.
It's like Polanco and like another like say like pitcher that's like 2 years away. for like 3 years away for Emerson Hancock, straight across.
I don't know if the Twins do it.
Okay, so Hancock for Polanco straight across, nothing. You're not doing it?
I'm not doing it. No.
Really? Okay.
For a year of Polanco, when we
Yeah, but
have
like we're not doing
Polanco at
anything
home,
with Emerson Hancock.
we have Polanco at home.
Sure, we might have
Name's
Polanco at
Josh
home.
Rojas.
Yeah, but we don't need Emerson Hancock.
We
So
don't need Jorge Polanco.
I mean, sure, I guess we don't need him, but fine. They're looking for pitching. You're not willing to part with it. In what world does this like trade go through?
Have a Taylor Dollard. That's all you're getting from me.
Only a Taylor Dollard.
I personally don't really care for Polanco or Kepler. I really don't. Don't get me wrong. Polanco was fine. He was decent in 2023. Let me pull up his numbers here.
I got
2023. Okay.
He had a 115 OPS plus.
Mm-hmm.
Right? 255, 335, 454 with a 789 OPS. That's his slash line. He hit 14 bombs, drove in 48 runs. He played only in 80 games. So, there's a little bit of injury problems last year. However, when healthy, he can give you 152 games like he did in 2021 and put up a 125 OPS plus. I'm okay with that at second base. Very okay with that at second base.
He has some pretty bad splits. He's hitting against righties in 2023. He hit 233. He still put up a 111 OPS plus. This doesn't seem right. Hold on.
Maybe it's just a bunch of pop from the right-handed side, but
yeah, he did hit 10 home runs right-handed. He hit 233, 333, 442 right-handed compared to 310, 341, 483 left-handed. So maybe he's a compliment to Rojas at second base. Maybe you platoon them instead.
Yeah,
like that's a possibility, I guess, if that's what you want to do.
Why are you talking about him like he's a switch hitter? Is he a switch hitter?
Polanco?
Oh my god, he is.
Yes, Jorge Polanco is a switch hitter.
Oh my god. I had no idea. I thought he was right-handed only. So you're saying like these splits, I'm like, why are you saying it like he's a switch hitter? Oh, that makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway,
well, there you go. He's a perfect compliment to Rojas.
You think so?
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't strike out that much. The most he struck out in a season was 118 times for the right price. Like, if it's Emerson Hancock, but for 1 year of Polanco, I don't know if I'm down for the potential of what you could get. I personally feel like you could use Hancock in a package and get more elsewhere, personally.
Sure. That is the conversation. Like, if we pulled the trigger now, would we have missed out on, maybe more value elsewhere? Probably. Potentially. It's definitely a possibility. You mentioned his strikeout rate. The highest in his career is 118, like you said. Last year was his highest percentage, though. He struck out 88 times in 80 games for a 25.7% strikeout rate. It's not great, but it's not nearly as much as like the Teos or the Genos that we had. So it can work, and that to me is an outlier as far as his strikeout percentage. It has been increasing ever since 2020, going up from 15 to 18 to 21 to 25 last year. But if he's not seeing every single at bat, I think there's a way to limit those strikeouts. And if he's seeing, the stronger side of his abilities, in terms of as being a platoon, I know the platoon term scares people. I think it could be a good fit overall. I don't know. I might just be willing to, since I know the depth we have at pitching. I know what we have with Castillo, Kirby, Gilbert, Miller, Wu, with Ray coming back after the All-Star break. Marco's going to be ready for spring training. What do we do with Hancock? Maybe go get something elsewhere, and I understand that. But
I mean, it's not like Hancock necessarily forces your hand to be on the major league roster. Like,
That's true.
he was not good enough to, I feel like, to earn his spot. He'd have to come into spring training and show up.
Just throw no hitters every single time. Yeah.
I don't know. For some reason, I am more interested in Max Kepler. Maybe it's just the Gold Glove defense, but. So in 2023, Kepler, he was 30. He played in 130 games. He hit 260, 332, 484 with a 121 OPS plus, 24 home runs. He did strike out 106 times, second highest of his career since 2017. But at the same time, he's only put up 3 seasons north of 100 OPS plus. That lefty swing in T-Mobile Park might look pretty dang good, though.
Yeah.
So, and he also doesn't have splits. Like, his splits aren't bad. Versus right-handed pitching versus left-handed pitching, he's hitting at least 250 against both. So
it's pretty consistent, yeah.
Yeah.
For Kepler, I think it can make sense as maybe the corner outfielder, and then we have a DH guy that we sign in free agency or we acquire elsewhere. to, go split time with him in the outfield, essentially. I mean, you probably don't need for him to split time because he's, like you're saying, gold glove defender. He's a great defender out there, especially if he's playing either corner. I think it's fine, but he's traditionally been a right fielder the most of his career, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so keep Jared in left, move Kepler, put Kepler out in right. You don't have to worry about Teo's potential spotty defense from last year. He did fine for the most part. There's just some mishaps where I was like, what the heck are we watching right now? So I don't disagree that I would be more interested in Kepler because it is a need that feels more like pertinent to right now. We have a guy that can go play second base for the majority of the innings if we need to in Josh Rojas. Currently right now, if we were to start the season tomorrow, we're either running Dom Canzone or Sam Haggerty out in right field or Cade Marlowe.
Yeah, I'm good.
So like I'm cool with not doing that and going out and get Max Kepler. Same question. Hancock for Max Kepler. More inclined to do it or you're still like hesitant?
I straight up, no.
Okay.
I actually think I'd be more willing to do Hancock for Jorge Polanco straight up than I would be Kepler, just because I feel like Polanco, that's a commodity that's harder to come by, whereas
Okay.
a corner outfielder would be much easier to come by than like a second base shortstop guy. So,
Okay.
that's where I'm at. I don't necessarily know like if people are agreeing with that because I still think that Emerson Hancock can fetch you more than either of those two guys. Maybe
Sure.
not by himself, but in some sort of package.
Okay.
And
yeah, I guess that is just the easiest name for me to throw out there because this is obviously not the Miller Wu trade conversation. This is not the
right.
Gilbert conversation. So I understand that. It's just as far as like trading from our prospect list, I don't really see a fit for the Twins.
For the Twins, no.
Because if they're trying to cut down payroll, but probably still be competitive because they know the AL Central's pretty weak, they think that they could probably trade these guys and recoup value elsewhere and like have Edward Julian have a continuous like great success there and be good for them, and Matt Wallner continuing to develop and Alex Kirilloff take the next step. So it seems like they're just like trimming the fat, but they probably still feel like they can be competitive next year. And
they should.
yeah, I mean, barring Correa not having another career worst year at the plate, they're probably looking okay.
Yeah, I mean, the AL Central's terrible, so it makes sense. I do think that a trade with the Minnesota Twins would make a lot of sense, but there are a bunch of other avenues the Mariners could go this offseason, making trades for corner outfielders, middle infielders, what have you, and we have that video on the screen right now. Go ahead and check that one out. Appreciate you guys watching this one, and go Mariners.